It's Friday. Time for Swan Lounge. Bitcoiners, pre-coiners, no coiners, new coiners, and of course, Swan Force members. Welcome to Swan Lounge, a weekly show in which you get to hang out with the Swan team and some of our friends from the incredibly exciting world of Bitcoin. Now, before we dive in, as always, we are giving away Jan Pritzker's book for free in an effort to spread Bitcoin knowledge. You can go to swanbitcoin.com/free book to get your free copy. All we ask is that you pay it forward. Share it with at least 3 friends and families. 3 friends and families? That works. Or family members. I think that's what I was going for. But share it around. Give it to as many people as you can, as many people as you'd like to. You can go. You can get it in MP3, read by our friend Guy Swan. We have it in 3 different ebook formats as well. So if you don't like to read, you can listen. That's what I do. We also are giving it away in Spanish, and I'm gonna nail it this time. Just wait. Y puede descargar su copia en español en www.swanbitcoin.com/libro gratis. I nailed it. For making myself laugh over here. Even more exciting, we are also giving away Gigi's incredible book, 21 Lessons. This is a book that's actually influencing our talk today. If you haven't read it, it is a must read. Go to swanbitcoin.com/21 lessons. That's 21 lessons to get your copy. Gigi basically is one of my favorite Bitcoiners, and he has learned quite a bit falling down the rabbit hole. And this book is an attempt to capture everything he's learned and share it with all of you. So, if you haven't read it, again, go swanbitcoin.com/21 lessons. All these links are in the description below. So if I was talking too fast, you can find them there. Now, I've got to ask, are you signed up for Swan Force yet? Because if you're not, you know what I'm going to say. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. All right. You're out there, you're orange pilling your friends, your family members. You're all excited about Bitcoin. Well, why not get paid for what you're already doing? Sign up your friends, sign up your family, and get paid to do that. You'll get 25% of Swan's fees on their purchases for an entire year. And you get your cool little landing page with your avatar. It's awesome. You just go to swanbitcoin.com/enlist to get started. I'd like to welcome anyone as well who's new to Swan Bitcoin. What is Swan Bitcoin? I don't even know anymore. We have just been growing so fast. But the core of what we do is we make it really, really easy to buy Bitcoin automatically or instantly. And we have a massive focus on education. We want you to learn all about Bitcoin and what it means to be a Bitcoiner. And this episode, we're really going to dive into that as well. In terms of, why you might want to sign up for Swan, look, it's easy. All right. All right, Brecky, I'm going to start over there. It is easy. The reason why it's so easy is because we looked all over the place. We looked at what works and what doesn't. And we thought to ourselves, all right, how do we build a product that we can recommend to our friends and family where they're not going to have any issues signing up? And if they do have any issues, where they're going to have a real person to talk to. And that's what Swan is. So, I recommend Swan to everyone. I'm biased. I work there, but everyone I send there is always sending me thank yous and positive vibes from being a part of the Swan family. So I hope you'll join it. Now, before I bring in our guests, one last thing. You know what I'm going to say? Hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Doing so helps us get seen on YouTube. Helps us grow the show so we can reach more people and so we can help them see why Bitcoin is so special. Now, today, we have some very special guests. We have got Kazs, Bycko. Kazs, I think I pronounced it right. You're going to correct me in a second. He is the host of the Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. He also works at Swan in private sales and entity onboarding. He's an awesome Bitcoiner. We've also got Stephen Cole, a venture investor and one of the finest Bitcoiners I know. And of course, we have Camilla Campton, the Joan of Arc of Bitcoin, the war maiden of Swan Force. If Freya, the leader of the Valkyries, and Athena, goddess of wisdom, had a baby, it would be Camilla Campton. And I'm excited for these 3 people to join me on the show. Today, we will be talking about the ethos of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is revolutionizing the monetary base layer of the entire world and our society as a whole. It is an entirely new financial system designed, I would argue, to benefit all of humanity and our environment. But how does it do that? How does it affect us as individuals? And how do those changes wrought at the individual level affect the world, society, and our environment as a whole? Well, let's dive in. It is time for Swan Lounge. Actually, it's time for me to unmute my guests first, which I always forget to do. It's now time for Swan Lounge. Hey, friends. How you doing today?
What's up, Brecky?
Hey.
Doing well. One second. I need to swap my sunglasses. We're doing sunglasses today. I don't know if it's part of the Bitcoin ethos or not, but
Going virtual to physical.
Yeah. Makes me feel like Morpheus in the Matrix a little bit.
You look like it with those glasses.
These are like my Sigmund Freud glasses a little bit. So tell me about your childhood and why did that childhood make you into a Bitcoiner today?
The orange future is so bright. We got to protect our eyes,
yes,
right?
That's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
So when I thought about doing this episode, we hadn't had Kazs on the show yet. I've been meaning to get him on for a while, and he was super pumped because he's been talking and thinking about the ethos of Bitcoin for a while. So I thought synchronicity was working. And Stephen, of course, is somebody who I think really embodies Bitcoin in many ways, like many Bitcoiners do. And as does Camilla. Camilla kind of came out of the gate hot and is leading the charge and is inspiring a lot of new Bitcoiners. So I think we've got a good group of guests here to talk about this. I'm not as organized as I would like to be today. I kind of have a jumble of things to talk about, but to start, maybe we can kind of elaborate on. There's this phrase that we say in Bitcoin all the time, that you don't change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you. Bitcoin changes people's economics, their political views, their time preference. For some people, it changes their diets, myself included, Stephen included, Kazs, I think maybe as well. So why don't we first, because I totally forgot to do this, Kazs and Stephen, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself first, and then we're going to dive into the ethos of Bitcoin. Stephen, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to be on the lounge today. So Stephen Cole, I've been in Bitcoin since about 2013, and it has changed me quite a bit. The focus of my involvement in the space is mostly on venture investing. I've been investing into Bitcoin startups for about 4 years myself now, and I recently joined a firm called Trammell Venture Partners, and we focus exclusively on investing into Bitcoin startups. So that's the main focus day to day. I'm also big into Austrian economics and nutrition. Probably get thrown into the Bitcoin carnivore bucket from time to time, and that again goes back to the ethos of Bitcoin and how it affects many areas of your life that are not obvious when you first learn about it, first get into it. So that's what I'm about in a nutshell.
Love it. Kazs, who are you?
What's up, everybody? I'm Kazs Bycko. Like Brecky gave in the introduction, I work at Swan, help companies and high net worth individuals get onboarded to the Bitcoin standard. And I also spread the Bitcoin signal through my podcast, Down the Rabbit Hole, where we cover, a wide range of topics that, Bitcoin really touches on many different things. And like Brecky and Stephen have both said already, it changes you as an individual, and it by default then changes your relationship with how you interact with the outside world and how you view the world. So I like to touch on health, fitness, not just the, typical economics, but also, relationships and how Bitcoin really changes every aspect of your life.
I love it. Kazs, the beginning part of that was more what you do, though, not who you are. And we're going to dig into who you are, I think. Who are you? We'll dig into that. But first, I wanted to give a quick shout out to all the people in the audience, in the chat, who are always with us. Uvas is always here. AKS74S always shares the Bitcoin dominance, even though I don't care about that metric. Thank you for being here to everybody else. Loyal viewers. So nice to have you here. If you have any questions for our guests throughout the show, by the way, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. We will be watching. All right, let's dive in. In preparation for the show, I was looking all over the place. I was remembering some of my favorite things that are more sort of philosophical in nature about Bitcoin. And I was looking back at 21 Lessons, and Gigi writes that 2 aspects of Bitcoin are absolutely essential: decentralization and immutability. And those are kind of things that are more, about the protocol itself. But I think it's sort of a good launching pad for the philosophy of Bitcoin, the ethos of Bitcoin. Why are those 2 things truly essential? What is it that, why do we as Bitcoiners believe that those things are so powerful and need to be preserved? And before I kind of give you guys the stage a little bit, I think a lot of the things that make Bitcoiners derive from Bitcoin in some way, right? From the values that we have, that lead us to preserve what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. And so I've got a bunch of things written down here that we're going to get into, but they are all kind of I don't know. It all seems to derive from Bitcoin. So why don't we talk a bit about that first? Decentralization and immutability. Like, what do those two things mean to all of you? I'm just gonna let the first person chime in. I'm too lazy to call on you like a teacher.
I can kind of take a first crack at it. I mean, decentralization and immutability are definitely two things that I consider top of mind when it comes to what's important about Bitcoin. And it was counterintuitive to me in my Bitcoin journey, right? Because I think a lot of times immutability, which essentially means, it can't be changed, that gets thought of as a bad thing in many parts of our society today for many things, right? So especially like I was working in Silicon Valley, and a lot of the people around there are all about, oh, you've got to be able to change things quickly. You've got to be agile. You've got to you've got one app this week, and the next week we're going to have this hip new app, and we keep iterating on it. And I think in certain social circles or professions, immutability, where you can't change something, goes kind of underappreciated. And so it took me a while to get oriented around that and to realize, like, oh, this thing that sounds like an anti-feature is actually the most important thing about this system. If we could change Bitcoin, if it were mutable, then we would. And, people around the world would exert influence. People would inflate the supply. They would change attributes about Bitcoin to, enrich themselves or to help themselves in some way. And because nobody can do that, that's the real magical forcing function in my eyes to it, is like, because we can't change it, that's where we get back to, it has to change you if you want to interface with it. And so I think when you connect a lot of dots, they all kind of lead deep down to that immutability at the root of it.
I think that's a great point, and I'll touch on the decentralization aspect. And so, like, when you're looking at typical institutions or the way pretty much anything's been formed throughout society and history, it's all been very like centralized in power and in thinking. And so whenever you have something that's actually decentralized, you're now empowering the minds of millions and billions of people instead of just, a very select few that have the decision making and the influence and control over other individuals. So I always like to think of decentralization as a precursor to what Bitcoin's most important property is, which is censorship resistance. So I think decentralization is very important, but it's also just a very it's a precursor to what is more important.
I also think immutability is super important because the way I look at Bitcoin is that this is a very strong and solid foundation that we're building a new society upon. And so if it's a very strong foundation, why would we want to change that into something weak or have trade-offs that can attack it? Once we have a solid foundation, it shouldn't be changed. We should just build on top of that. And that's why it's super important to not be able to change it. And I do feel like it's a very strong and solid foundation that's going to help humanity in the future. So I love that it can't be changed.
Well, it creates absolute truth, which is something that's it doesn't exist in most of our society.
Yeah, agree completely. And I think the predictability that it offers, especially even from a technology perspective, if you're thinking about building applications or building a whole stack of protocols, you don't want to build your house on sand, right? You want a solid, stable, predictable foundation. And I think there are a lot of developers out there right now who are, kind of falling victim to the allure of some of the other cryptocurrencies to test out their apps and build atop. And I worry that that's not going to go well for them because that foundation may shift out from under them. And, Bitcoin may be kind of limited in features at the base layer, but that simplicity is by design. You get so much security from that, and just the knowledge that that won't change out from under you lets you lower your time preference and really, really build for the long term.
So that's a great segue. Lowering your time preference. I feel like this is something that Bitcoiners talk about ad nauseum. Every other sentence is, something about lowered time preference, but it's important, And so where does this come from? What does it mean? How does, and how, why don't we relate it to ourselves here? Let's get into what lowered time preference means, where it stems from, why it's important to kind of the Bitcoin as a whole in terms of, what Bitcoin is doing. But then we can kind of dive into how it's affected us as people. Does anyone want to tackle, want to attempt to answer why Bitcoiners are low time preference people and what low time preference means?
I'll take a stab at it. So low time preference is basically just prioritizing the long term over your short term wants. And that can be as simple as savings. And a lot of Bitcoiners, use Bitcoin as just a savings tool. And that's their idea of low time preference. And the further you go down the time preference rabbit hole, this is where it leads into other aspects of your life. Because if you're really, you're planning for your future, you're trying to financially secure your future. What is it if your body's not there, right? If your body's not healthy, you may not even be alive for the future. So are you really thinking about the long term if you're not prioritizing your health as well?
Yeah, I've even heard anecdotes, around the Bitcoin community along the lines of, I quit smoking because I want to live long enough to see Bitcoin reach the moon. And, it's kind of sounds wild to people who may not be in the space yet or understand how big of a deal some people think this is. But I think it's so powerful. It really does influence and encourage people to think long term. And once you believe that you've found this, asset, new money that's going to be so much more valuable in the future, that can really protect the time, essentially the value of your labor that you're storing in it, then it makes you much more interested in being around to see that through later on. And so it cascades into other areas of your life, your health and well-being, wellness, and it's very powerful. I think the first time I encountered the term time preference was in Saifedean's book, The Bitcoin Standard. But I'm trying to, I know it's an economics term. I'm trying to remember if it was coined in the Austrian school, if it was like Carl Menger who coined the term, or if it was Mises. I'm not sure. But yeah, essentially how much you value the present relative to the future. And almost like that Stanford marshmallow experiment, right? Where they gave the kids the marshmallows and like, if you can last this long.
I think it's been discredited since then. As much as I love that experiment.
Yeah, I know it has, unfortunately. but
we'll still use the metaphor.
Right. But to illustrate the notion of like, valuing the present over the future, essentially that.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting also, go for it, Camilla.
Oh no, I just wanted to say it's such a contrast with society nowadays, since most of the people, especially in the fiat world, are looking for like that high time preference, that kind of rush that you get, that instant gratification, in a sense, it's really false, because once that instant gratification is kind of gone, then you're just kind of like, what is the next high time preference thing I can get to kind of get that pump
Camilla,
up.
can you go like my recent tweet, please? It'll make me feel better for a millisecond, and I would really
just hopping from one dopamine
like
rush
right now.
To the next
go like my recent tweet.
Okay, I will. But it's true. It's like high time kind of like this drug that our society is in nowadays, where they're always going for it, but in reality, it doesn't fulfill them. And what they don't realize is that if you start to have a low time preference thinking and you start to build towards a future that you see it's possible, that you're hopeful, that you're building this amazing future, you're going to have way more gratification during the journey and when you get there. So it's something that definitely differentiates us a lot with the fiat world.
I feel like it differentiates us as human beings. Like the fact that throughout history there have been more than a few people who knew how to lower their time preference. That's the reason why we have civilization. I think the example in Safe's book, if I remember correctly, was like they use the classic like fisherman example, right? Like you could go wade out into the water and try to catch a fish with your hands, and maybe you'll be there all day and you'll feed yourself, but that's kind of all you'll do. But if you take the time to make a fishing pole, you'll be able to fish more, and you'll have more time to make, I don't know, a boat, and then society progresses. And so fiat money to me is almost like it's a regression to like an animal state. It's like it's society regressing, and that's why I think Bitcoin is so important. And what you've all kind of hinted at is that it starts at the individual level. Bitcoin doesn't magically fix everything, but it can fix us if we let it. And the collective kind of change among everyone, among Bitcoiners and the people who Bitcoiners interact with, is where the real power comes in. Oh, Stephen left us and he's back. Hey. I kind of liked the how we were organized before. There we go.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My fiat internet went out.
Fiat internet. So Camilla, I was thinking, not to put you on the spot, but I think you are the newest Bitcoiner among us. So what I would love to know from you is, how has Bitcoin changed you? Because I feel like for us, we've been here a bit longer, and the changes, we might not remember the changes as well, whereas you're really living it. So, what was it like when you actually had your aha moment and found Bitcoin? And what are some of the things that you think it have, how has it impacted you? Were you always the person you are now, or, did Bitcoin kind of really take some of the things that were latent and, bring them out,
Yeah, so it's really funny because I actually had this conversation with Kazs yesterday. And I always considered myself a low time preference person, even though I had no idea that term exists. It was also when I read Stephen Dean's book that I was like, oh, I can finally put this into a sentence or a word that makes sense. So to me, it just made me feel really great that I was able to find kind of my people that think the same way I do, because it's so contrary to how people usually think, especially people my age. And when I was growing up in my early 20s, I was always thinking about the future, what can I do right now to build for my future? And so when Bitcoin came along, I was like, this is the perfect tool where I can actually put all of my work and effort into this. And I'm not the only one crazy. There's a whole bunch of crazy there with me that think the same way that I do. So I was always a happy person, happy, hopeful person. But when Bitcoin came into my life, it was finally yes, this is exactly what my soul has been looking for my whole life. This is a community that I wanted to interact with my whole life. It's real, it's happening. So it just made me 10 times more excited about life in general. So.
You're a terrible example here, Camilla, because you were already a Bitcoiner and you just didn't know it yet. Okay, I'm looking for folks who made it change.
But it's funny to say though, because I do feel like there's probably a lot of people like me out there that they have this mentality but haven't been able to actually put it into words or find the right tool where they can actually live this type of lifestyle. So yeah.
So
there's a lot of dormant Bitcoiners.
Exactly.
Yes.
Stuck in the fiat world. They just need that orange pill to get them to open their eyes. Why don't we talk a bit about what that actually means, though, this sort of Bitcoiner lifestyle? We talked about lowered time preference, but what are some of the other things that you think are important? To me, it's things like responsibility. As a Bitcoiner, I don't want the state to be responsible for myself. I don't want I want to be responsible for myself. We say things like not your keys, not your coins. We urge people to run nodes. But what does responsibility mean to you all in the context of Bitcoin? And what other things do you think have become important to you as a Bitcoiner? Kazs, I'll throw this one to you.
Yeah. So another thing we like to say a lot that is very important is don't trust, verify, right? And this is one of the first things you kind of encounter when you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and people echo it every day. But you really have to examine that, and all of society, everybody is trusting. They're trusting almost all the information that comes out. They're trusting, institutions to handle their money. They're trusting in almost every factor of their life. And then they get introduced to Bitcoin, and it flips that on its head. So to even understand Bitcoin, you have to believe in yourself enough, or just keep going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, how can I unwind what I think I knew? You pretty much have to re-examine your entire worldview before you can even begin to understand Bitcoin. And so outside of that, like, what else does Bitcoin mean to me, and how has it changed me as an individual? And personal responsibility, right? It's Bitcoin is very unforgiving, and you'll learn that when you first, start to transact on Bitcoin, and you mess around and you mess up and you actually lose your money, and there's nobody to call, there's nobody to help you. So the responsibility is like embedded in the Bitcoin protocol for the individual. You have to learn to manage your own money. You have to learn to protect it. You have to learn to, potentially use it privately. All of things that there's nobody to really help you. You kind of have to just do it yourself. Luckily, there are a lot of great resources out there now, but you can't just, have some like call Matt Odell, or somebody to come over to your house and teach you how to do this shit. Sorry.
Wait. There is Swan Private Client Services. Okay, you can give us a call.
You can call us.
We'll help you out.
Right.
But when you're actually sending the transactions, that's on you. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So,
and there are no rollbacks.
So, but let's flip this though. So like, it's not just responsibility, it's power, with like that, the responsibility comes from the fact that Bitcoin empowers people. So, I mean, I don't know, to me, that's one of the biggest things about Bitcoin is living in clown world, in a world where nothing makes sense. Bitcoin is not only hope, but it's it makes me feel incredibly powerful in a very positive and uplifting way. Yeah, that was just my rant.
So, yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the Spider-Man thing, right? Like with great financial sovereignty comes great responsibility. and I think in addition to responsibility, one thing the Bitcoin ecosystem has given me and more of an appreciation for is kind of integrity and like the value of reputation, because in this community, it's kind of a low time preference activity to have to gradually establish credibility and the trust of the people that you work with or that the members of the community. And it's so easy to quickly demolish that and mess it up, right? And so I think that's another thing that I've noticed among Bitcoiners, are they just tend to be very high integrity. There are situations where I've dealt with Bitcoiners and kind of, done deals or worked on projects just on handshakes rather than having to rely on a lot of legal agreements and, complexity, because it's easier to trust when you believe that people have that same respect for reputation that we do in this space.
It's kind of an interesting paradox that, for a trustless system, there is a lot of trust among Bitcoiners. And, it's trust for different things. So it does make sense. But, if I went to, I don't know, any major city on the planet, I think there's a Bitcoiner there who would like let me stay on their couch, and for a lot of, not every Bitcoiner, but for a lot of them, the same holds true here for me. So it's sort of a beautiful community of like-minded thinkers. Are you raising your hand to speak, or just plus one?
I'm raising my hand. Well, I think it's an incredible phenomenon also, because whenever you interact with Bitcoin, it's also a huge ego check, and so it really makes you take a step back, and it makes you question, am I doing this for my ego, or am I actually doing something to contribute to Bitcoin and the network? Because if you do something that's actually contributing to the network, it's actually going to make everyone's lives better. But if you're doing something that's just for your own ego, I feel like Bitcoin is going to come with its hammer and just smash your brain, because that's not the way to live life. So it's great. It's a great way to just really look at yourself in the mirror and think to yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why am I actually, doing what I'm doing? Should I do what I'm about to do? It just really makes you think on your actions a little bit more. So I think that's awesome.
There's 100%. There's something I ask myself whenever I'm kind of looking at someone who is new to the space or doing a project, or even, when we're about to do something at Swan, what I ask is, is is this person putting their ego ahead of Bitcoin, or are they can still have an ego, but like, to me, the most important thing is, like, if you're a Bitcoiner and your goal is to be, helping Bitcoin, the ego, your personal ego can't come first. And that kind of brings me to one of my absolute favorite philosophers of all time, a very, very wise old soul. Many of you might know him. His name is Matthew Odell, and he has a maxim that I live by, which is stay humble and stack sats. And I think we were kind of just touching on this, and this is more of a funny way of thinking about it. And it's important to think about, like, what does that actually mean? AKS74S in the chat wrote Robert Breedlove in there. Kind of I think a good example of someone who forgot maybe some of the things that that we're talking about, and then rediscovered them. I think he's on the path to redemption among some Bitcoiners, at least. Some maybe never, but but that's the thing. It's like, maybe for a brief moment he forgot what was happening. So, like, what does it mean to stay humble and stack sats? Did we kind of nail it on the head just now, or is there more to it?
Ooh.
Camille, you need a beer in order to do this. It makes it much better.
I could never.
Wait, you're saying you can't grow a beard, Camilla?
Or
No.
won't?
No, I can't, guys. Sorry.
It's all right.
Bitcoin changes you in a lot of ways, but that doesn't usually happen.
And I'm glad we can keep that.
Although, actually, I have noticed a lot of Bitcoiners do have beards. So maybe for men, it is one of those things that changes you that way. Lower time preference, I guess.
Mr. Rochard grew an impressive beard.
But yeah.
When I think about staying humble and stacking sats, when I try to think about the most prominent example in Bitcoin history of not staying humble and stacking sats, I think about the SegWit 2x debacle a few years ago, essentially the block size wars and the fork wars. And I think a lot of the companies and the wealthy individuals, the sort of like Bitmains and Jihan Woos of the world, that was an example of what we were just describing, right? Forgetting to stay humble. And they thought that they were so powerful that they could change Bitcoin. And I think their ego ran away with them a little bit. And it was, obviously there was a lot of uncertainty because it was the first time Bitcoin had really been put through that kind of a test, trial by fire. But Bitcoin came out the other side of that unchanged and unscathed. And a lot of those individuals and companies were very humbled, very publicly, and lost a lot of money as a result. They had a lot of skin in the game. And I try to think about that, and just at the individual level, make sure that day to day I stay humble, and I just try to keep learning more about this stuff and from people in the community every day.
Hell yeah. Real quick, someone in the chat is asking why glasses. Mr. Torktumlare, sorry if I mispronounced that. The reason why we are wearing glasses is so that we don't burn you with our laser eyes. We're looking out for you. Okay, this is for your own good.
Safety precautions.
You had that lined up. You're waiting.
He was so ready. Also,
so much fun.
In terms of staying humble, it also just has to deal with a lot of people are chasing these very big gains, these very big fiat gains, and just want to flex to their friends and family, and they got the Lambo and blah blah blah. But what people don't realize is that when you start to lose your focus and all these flashy things and flashy projects, you may end up losing a lot of your Bitcoin. And that's probably like the most hurtful thing that can happen to a person, is for them to lose their Bitcoin, when it's, like we were just saying, the perfect foundation, the most secure, predictable thing. Why would you give that up for something that may never even happen? So I think that's when, as an individual, we have to remember to just stay humble. Just remember that the game is to just stack as many sats as you can, and the rest is going to play out. It's already playing out. So don't get it. Yeah. Go ahead.
If you want to be happy, buy Bitcoin for others. But if you want others to be happy, buy Bitcoin. No, shit, I screwed that one up. How does that go? If you want others to be happy, buy them Bitcoin. But if you want to be happy, buy Bitcoin for others. It's this weird little thing. I took it from a Dalai Lama quote, and it's. I was going through this phase. This was like probably 5 years ago. I was like really nihilistic, really depressed. I was like, the world's so greedy, this and that. I came upon this book from the Dalai Lama called The Wisdom of Compassion. And it had this whole section on, I think it's like enlightened greed or something like that. And it kind of comes from this idea that what we perceive as greed is really materialism. It's not actually greed. And that greed is okay, but you have to bring altruism into it in a way, like the only way to achieve happiness is to do for others. And you can be greedy. You can want to acquire wealth, but if the purpose is pure materialism and there's no enlightened aspect to it, then, ultimately it doesn't matter. I wonder if you all have thought of anything about anything like that. Like what guides your lives besides Bitcoin, or is Bitcoin the only force in your morality and ethics and all that?
It makes me think of American Hodl gave such a great presentation at the BitBlock Boom conference in Dallas recently. I think the title of it was Bitcoin Mafia. And he was basically talking about how, the PayPal Mafia is well known for the ways in which they shaped the world with their capital, right? So like Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, Elon Musk, that whole gang, they've gone on to like create huge companies, change the world, get us to space, all that kind of stuff. And so American Hodl's premise for his talk was essentially, like if we believe so strongly that Bitcoin's inevitable and Bitcoin's going to win, then yes, you want to stack sats and get as much of it as you can. But like, what are we going to do with those sats? Like, what's the why behind it? And start thinking about how you're going to use your Bitcoin, that capital, to change the world. And I think that was such a good reminder of, it's Bitcoin leads us somewhere, but it's not really the end in itself, right? And so what is your individual why? What's at the end of it for you?
Absolutely. Bitcoin is a tool. That's what it is. It's a tool that's going to help us build whatever we want to build in the future. And it's so crazy to be a part of a community that you can sense that, for the most part, what I've been able to see, everyone just has such an amazing heart, and it's actually really looking out for humanity as a whole. It's such a selfless type of community that once we have that power in our hands to really just use Bitcoin and make a huge difference, it's a legacy to be able to mess with, and I think that's absolutely beautiful.
For anyone in the chat, sorry, real quick, Kaz, anyone in the chat, if you want to let us know, what do you think the Bitcoin ethos is? I'll throw it up on the screen. Maybe we'll discuss. If you consider yourself a Bitcoiner, what does that mean to you? Go. All right, Kaz, back to you.
Yeah, so I like what Steven said about how Bitcoin is really like just the beginning. And so I think a lot of Bitcoiners are now coming to terms with this, that, over the next 10, 15, or 20 years, as we really materialize into the Bitcoin standard, we're going to have the capital to do a lot of different things. You've seen that in the past, that some people in the Bitcoin space, they get exponentially wealthy and they don't use it in the right way. And they're quickly, cast out of consensus with the Bitcoiners network. And so I think it's really interesting that the conversations that are happening at a lot of these Bitcoin conferences lately, specifically like Miami and BitBlock Boom, most of the conversations are not even around Bitcoin anymore between Bitcoiners. They're like thinking on a 10-year time frame of, okay, how are we going to, move about the world in the next 10 to 15 years? What are we going to build? How are we going to protect ourselves? How are we going to protect our families? And that's some of the things that, guide my life as well. Like, I don't have a family yet, but like that is on my roadmap. And that is something I'm preparing for with my Bitcoin right now. I'm thinking about, my future kids. And that's something that, it definitely was not on my radar a couple of years ago before I found Bitcoin. I felt like there was a lot of lost hope, and there's a lot of, there's not very much hope between people in the fiat matrix is what I like to refer to it as, because they see, if they're young and they're in their 20s, they've seen the effects of money printing, and they see how difficult it is to kind of rise out of that. Bitcoin really is the exit, but it's like, where do we take it from there?
What are you trying to tell me? That like one day I can spend my Bitcoin for millions?
No, Neo.
I mean, come on, somebody knows the other line.
No. Trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
Yeah. I did tweet that out once, though, that, I'm not just doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for your kids and your future kids as well. So it's a community thing for sure. And no one's going to be able to mess with that. We already won in my book. So
there's
absolutely.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll echo that. Yeah, a lot of what you said too, Kaz, resonates with me. Like, I think Bitcoin lowered my time preference and got me thinking more about having a family, having kids, something I wasn't as certain that I wanted, if you rewind 5 years or so. And so at the individual level, I think it's like thinking along those lines, and then zooming out to the society level, it's kind of like wanting to invest my time and capital, hopefully, to just try to promote more freedom. I just want the future to be more free. And I think the ways in which the future could be more free aren't really obvious to us, because all of our lives we've existed in this fiat system, right? Where so much of our time is just quietly stolen from us by the money. And so we don't really even know what that, like how bright that future could be, I think, or appreciate it. But I'm optimistic that on a Bitcoin standard, people can really have more time to just pursue what they want to pursue. They won't have to be working as hard at jobs they may not necessarily be passionate about. And life can just be more fulfilling, can have more artists and philosophers, and people can really pursue whatever they want to, if all goes according to the Bitcoin plan.
Camilla made a really awesome point on my podcast yesterday. She was saying, referencing the time theft that's going on through money printing. And her idea, or one of the ways that she looks at Bitcoin, is that she's buying time back in her future to spend like more time with her kids. Like, you're not going to have to work as hard if you, save in Bitcoin.
Love it.
Exactly.
Narwhal Taco writes, 15 years ago, I lost hope that humanity could ever escape the cycle of greed, power, and corruption spinning the world towards destruction. Bitcoin has shown me a bright future worth fighting for. Yes, Narwhal, I'm here for that.
That's a great one.
That's what's up.
Oh man, I was going to say something. Okay, I actually have a difficult question here. Maybe not difficult, but maybe something that we need to think about. I feel like there are a lot of people. There are people like us who I think can rise to the occasion and understand that power is good. The empowered individual is a good thing, and responsibility is worth taking. But what do you say to those folks who, the sheeple out there, the people who prefer to be told what to do, who want to have a cushion to fall on, if they make a mistake, do you think that with a Bitcoin standard, we'll be able to get everyone over that hump and get them to realize that this is a better way of being? Or, are there some people who are just lost and will never be able to, benefit from that way, and will find themselves out of place and out of time and out of Bitcoin?
That was a tough
Yeah, I usually lead with just have fun staying poor. No,
Kaz, no.
And next question. Yeah. No, I'm optimistic that that the future would be better for those people. Like, they would still have the safety nets and even the ability to have hierarchical structures and leadership, all those things that they may prefer and derive a sense of comfort from. I think all of that is potentially present in this future. I think they all just look a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And so the notion of moving to a future like that, where those safety nets come from different places in society. Maybe it's not these, government imposed programs and social security and whatever. Maybe it's more philanthropy based, and maybe it's you and the people around you who know you and care about you having more resources. Yeah. And so I think and there can still be leaders too, right? Like they can maybe even be leaders that we admire greatly and are kind of voluntarily elected, and there's like a strong code of ethics among a community. I think all of that is possible. It just looks so different from what we have today that it's hard for many people to conceptualize.
I love what you're saying, because like nowadays, and I also touched this with Kazs yesterday, we don't have anyone to look up to right now. We don't trust anyone. We don't see I know, Brecky, other than you, right? But,
yeah, other than Brecky, I don't know who to look up to.
I'm actually quite short, so looking up to me is more of a looking down to me proposition, but you get the idea.
Yeah, but a lot of people just don't see like a great example of a community yet, because I still feel like we're very early and we haven't gotten our full potential yet as a community. But people out there just don't see anyone that to look up to be like, hey, this is the way of life that I want to live. Everything is just so fake. Everything is so transitory. Everything is just so messed up out there. But when we start to have these leaders in the community, like you guys were saying, that actually show that there is a different way, we're going to be like, hey guys, this is the way. And I feel like more people will actually start to follow us and actually start to see why it's so important to be responsible of your own life, be a sovereign individual, and that they also will have the power to change their lives and then the lives of the people around them. But today is just really hard to look up to anybody in leadership, in anything. So I just still feel like we're very early in the story, but eventually we are going to get there.
100%. There's a quote from one of the Stoics, Epictetus. I can't pronounce his name, but anyway, it says, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." So Bitcoiners out there, lead by example. I was going to close the show with that, but it just fit with this perfectly. So,
love that.
I had to bring it up now.
That's a good one.
So, piggybacking off of what Camilla just said, I'd actually say everything she said about not being able to trust people in society, that's totally true. But there are a lot of Bitcoiners that I look up to, and I've actually found some mentors, like very valuable mentors through Bitcoin. So I think it's just a different relationship with how society is going to change in the future moving forward. And maybe, this isn't super, super happy, but my thoughts on like how this is going to look in the future, like when we talk about more private cities on a smaller scale, I just believe that there's going to inevitably be pockets of people that want a default trust, and they want to offboard or like outsource control to other people. And there's always going to be people like that. So there'll be pockets of, sovereign villages where people use Bitcoin, and there'll be pockets where people probably default trust, to other people.
I think so. I wanted to point out also, we Bitcoiners do tend to say, have fun staying poor quite often, because it's kind of funny depending on the context. But I actually think there's a greater sort of philosophical underpinning to the pithy phrase. I think Joe Rogers did a tweet storm about this. I'll see if I can find it later. But like, on the rare occasion when I say it, and I only say it to like one of someone who's just hardcore shitcoiner, who is like someone like Peter Schiff, someone who really deserves it, and when I do it, what it means to me is like, it's like the Epictetus quote, rise to the occasion. It's like, try to figure out why someone is saying this to you and challenge your beliefs. Like what would prompt someone to say this? It's not out of malice or spite. It's hoping that you'll understand, why we are hardcore Bitcoiners. So anyway, it's just something.
That's a great point. And it goes back full circle to, stay humble, right? So part of staying humble is constantly questioning what you know to be true or what you believe to be true in that moment. And so it doesn't matter if you think, you're at the bottom of the Bitcoin rabbit hole, which doesn't exist. There are people that have believed that in the past, and they've been humbled. So you have to keep learning, you have to keep pressing on and challenging, what you think is true.
And we say, don't trust, verify. And I think that applies to more than just, the latest blocks and transactions in those blocks. It applies to, every aspect of Bitcoin and everything in your life, so it's It's an important thing. We're coming up towards the end of the hour, and I wanted to end on something a little less serious, a little more fun. So why don't we get into how Bitcoin has changed our diets and talk about what we like to eat, and maybe I can get some recipes from you two carnivores, or three carnivores actually. So Stephen, I really love following you. I don't go on Instagram very often, but every time I do, you always have a story, and there's always something there about the food chain or your diet or seed oils. So please tell us about the dangers of seed oils and how Bitcoin helped you overcome them.
Yes, Bitcoin has got me thinking a lot about nutrition over the years, and especially recently been on a big anti-seed oils kick. I am increasingly convinced that seed oils are at the root of a lot of nutritional badness in our society. So I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, seed oil minimalist. And I would say, so I've been cooking with a lot of coconut oil, avocado oil, tallow, grass-fed butter, and that sort of thing. And I think the seed oils that are used all over in society, in restaurants, even at Whole Foods, places that are very health nutrition forward,
but
like Whole
they're
Foods.
From organic seeds, though, right? At least.
right. Yeah. They use expeller pressed canola oil all over the place. Which
what the hell is a canola? Nobody knows what a canola is. They got to rename these things so you don't actually ask what they are.
Yeah, basically like invented in a lab in like the 1970s. So yeah, I think I would encourage people to, I think more people are starting to pay attention to macronutrients like, keto or paleo and like eating low carb. And that's fantastic. And I have done a lot of that and had a lot of success with that. But I think seed oils are like the next wave of thing in nutrition that people should be paying attention to. And I know I have felt so much better since I've started cutting those out of my day to day. And I even go into restaurants and I ask them like, what oil do you cook with sometimes? Just so, and I won't like walk out and be super rude if it's not what I'm wanting to hear, but I probably won't like go back there again next week. So
like seed oils are fiat, and it's no surprise that you said that it was invented in the 70s. Like, if you can run your car with it, you probably shouldn't be putting it in your body. So,
well, it's a good rule of thumb. I think
you can run your car on ethanol, and every now and then I do love me some ethanol.
So that is true. You still shouldn't be putting it in your body, even though I'm drinking a White Claw. The answer is you shouldn't be.
That's true.
Yeah.
Stephen, real quick, can you rank the fats and oils for us? I saw you tweet about this the other day. What is your personal ranking?
So for anyone who's not into animal products, like if you're vegetarian or vegan for ethical reasons or anything, then avocado oil and coconut oil are the go-tos I would recommend. But that aside, my personal ranking would be either ghee or grass-fed butter at the top. I think that's like the healthiest saturated fat composition that you can get in grass-fed butter. And then probably tallow, like beef fat, essentially after that. And then I would say, avocado oil and coconut oil. It's the approximate ranking. And then olive oil is like decent, but you have to really scrutinize the label on that stuff because sometimes they'll do the very fiat type of trick where they'll label it olive oil and then you look closely at the label and it's like 90%
flavored canola.
some other garbage. Yeah, totally.
It's the last ingredient.
Yeah.
They put like one little olive in there and that's it.
Exactly. So again, don't trust, verify.
And that's the great thing about Bitcoin, right? Is you can verify it yourself. Unfortunately, with some fats, you cannot verify without a lab. If you make your own tallow, you could verify. If you make your own bacon fat, you can verify. And if anyone's interested, Costco usually has these big mama containers of ghee, and they're awesome. That's where I go.
Ooh, yeah, nice.
It's a good move. Kaz, give me some recipes, or tell us how Bitcoin has influenced your diet, if it has influenced your diet.
It's definitely influenced my diet. So I actually had an autoimmune disorder that I found before Bitcoin. I was allergic to gluten. So I had to change my diet from a younger age. And then it led to me just naturally experimenting with it. So I was always more open to trying, different things. Went through the vegan route, went through pescatarian, which doesn't even make sense. And then through Bitcoin, I found the carnivore. I'm not carnivore right now. I'd say I definitely, there are a lot of benefits to it. It's difficult lifestyle to maintain for some people. For me, it was. But I think what Steven's point was about the seed oils is way higher than, a specific macronutrient composition.
Wait,
Like-
sorry, I got to interrupt real quick. Sorry. Narwhal Tacos said they'll have to pry toasted sesame seed oil out of my cold, dead hands. And I got to say, I love sesame seed oil. Is that an exception, Steven? Can I have some of that or no?
I mean, it's a seed oil, but I would say, sometimes it makes sense to optimize for what is fun and delicious and celebrate and live a little. But yeah, it's still a seed oil. So broadly speaking, yikes.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Kaz, back to you.
So I just want to say that, like, one of the more recent ones, I know Steven's a big fan of this one. Maybe he can speak to more of the benefits, but the raw egg schlonking, right? We've been drinking raw eggs and schlonking.
We had to. That was our thing. We agreed. We had to fit that word into this.
Well, congratulations, you've done it.
You teed us up perfectly for this.
You've won the prize of explaining the word and why you had to force that word into the show.
Yeah. So you asked for one of my favorite recipes. One of my favorite recipes nowadays is waking up in the morning, cracking somewhere between 5 to 10 eggs into a glass, stirring it up with some hot sauce and like hot chili powder, and then schlonking it.
Got it. That's pretty hardcore. I've never done the raw eggs thing. Oh, wait a second. I was talking to you guys about the egg coffee a while back, I think. Did you ever end up trying it?
I did. It was really good.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't try it in coffee yet. I'll have to do that. I forgot. I love bulletproof coffee.
You got to be very careful though, because if you're like tired, you haven't had your coffee yet, and you pour it the wrong direction, you'll end up cooking your eggs in the coffee. So if I remember correctly, so you whisk the eggs, and then you've got to pour the coffee in the eggs, or the eggs in the coffee. Coffee in the eggs. Coffee into the eggs. I think, and whisk. I think that's how it works. Anyway, try it both ways. And let us know which one works. Camilla, I feel like you've always been an active, fit, eating well type of person. But how has Bitcoin changed your diet?
So I actually haven't been the healthiest my whole life. It was when I turned 17 that I started to look into nutrition and stuff, and that completely changed my life. For anyone that hasn't read Lynn Alden's article about like productivity, I don't remember the name of it, but she goes into like nutrition there as well and talked about like the importance of micronutrients and stuff, and just like in places that you can get those and how that can actually help your productivity. It's a really awesome read, and I feel like everyone should read it. I eat anything. I love food in general. I'm not a picky eater. So I definitely enjoy being able to treat myself at times, but then, just make sure that I'm taking care of, because as I've said, I feel like we're preparing for battle, right? In this crazy fiat world. So we need to make sure that we're prepared spiritually, mentally, and also physically, because if we want to see all of this play out, then we want to make sure that we're healthy enough to live it and to be able to, help those in need. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to help anyone else. So start with yourself, and then just give back to other people.
I love that so much. And just to riff on that a little bit, I've noticed that so much positive change just really starts like inward, right? Like anytime that I see something wrong in the world and I start to criticize it or get frustrated by it, it oftentimes is just a matter of like, I need to focus on me, and then like layers outward, right? It's like yourself, your household, your family, your community, and then the world broadly. And so I think you make an excellent point with that.
Are you ready
to change yourself before you can change the world?
Yes.
Yep.
Am I ready for battle? Was that the question?
Yes. Are you ready for battle?
And my axe. Yes, I'm ready for battle.
Good.
I'm working on the stamina. Me and the pup go on walks. I'm gradually increasing that, but getting there. I think we're almost done today. If we want to go around, any closing words of advice, any shills, anything goes. Final words for the folks at home. Kaz, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I'll just leave it with stay humble and stack sats.
Steven's like,
That's
shit,
what that's
I was going to say.
literally is
Short
what
and
I,
sweet.
yeah. I was going to hat tip to Mr. Odell, the sage, and say,
All right,
stay
well-
humble, stack sats.
We'll go to Camilla, and then we'll give you probably 5 seconds to think of something new. Camilla, what do you got for everybody? Although you just spilled your heart out, so I think you pretty much already said what you had to say. But in case,
Sure, just anyone out there, just you're very valuable as a person, and you have to be able to really believe that and just start working on yourself, and you're going to be able to contribute so much into Bitcoin, into the world. So just believe in yourself, and you got this.
Love that. Very positive note. And I think I would just say to anyone, especially to the uninitiated, maybe there are some people relatively new to Bitcoin who are hearing this conversation and they're sort of like, what in the world? Like, how do you get from this like new tech money stuff to all of this life stuff? And it probably sounds just completely crazy. And it did to me too at first when I started to tumble down this magical rabbit hole. And I would encourage anyone feeling that way to just indulge your curiosity a little bit. And there are a lot of dots to connect, but if you connect them, it might not be as crazy as it seems. So give Bitcoin a chance.
boom. Thank you so much, Steven. That was great. Thank you to Kaz. Thank you to Camilla. Thank you to everyone in the chat who is keeping us entertained and watching today. You all know I don't like to do ending shills, but sign up for Swan Bitcoin. Okay, what else? Sign up for Swan Force. Get Gigi's book, 21 Lessons. You'll learn everything. You can like leapfrog everything we were just talking about. It's swanbitcoin.com/21 lessons. And I think I'm not going to repeat what AKS said in the chat. That might help, but that's on you.
That may get you banned from YouTube.
I would say meditate instead of, or along with what AKS was saying. You get the same result. It might take longer, but anyway. So thank you all. We will see you all next week. I can't even finish what I'm saying. We'll see you all next week. And I'm just going to say the words of Epictetus one more time. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. So Bitcoiners, go out there, lead by example. Let's charge into this bright orange future, and we'll see you next week.
Good times.